Thank you all very much for joining us. I can see we have just over 40 participants in this webinar on the Zoom call. We are also doing this live as a webcast on Facebook, so we may have others joining us on that. My colleagues will be collecting questions from you in the chat box. So if anybody has questions or comments, please write them into the chat box, and we will then be able to share them with the speakers. So what we are planning to do today is to start a conversation that we hope will be a long-term conversation. We are calling this a 10-year journey to make Bangladesh into a resilient country, a whole of society approach to making all of our citizens resilient to the impacts of climate change. And not just Bangladesh, we are also hoping to share this with other least developed countries. And we have another webinar coming up with the least developed countries universities consortium on climate change, which we coordinate to talk about how they can also do this. So we will do this as a South-South sharing initiative. We want to do this also as a public-private sharing initiative as well, government and non-governmental organizations and academic institutions like ours. So we are very pleased to have a very stellar panel of speakers today representing the different stakeholder groups. With the first speaker will be Professor Shamsul Alam, the Senior Secretary and Member Planning Commission of the General Economics Division. We are also very pleased to have with us Rear Admiral retired Sarwar Hussain, Qazi Sarwar Hussain, also Secretary Sultana Afroz, who is now head of the Public-Private Partnership Office in the PM's office. Also Inamul Kabir Pavel from IDCOL, who are a major institution working on mitigation, and Ms. Farah Kabir, who is head of ActionAid, one of the major international NGOs, but also a major Bangladeshi NGO as well. So from each of our main speakers, after we get the presentation, we will want to know a little bit about their thoughts and their ideas for us to take forward in how do we make the best investment, and particularly what do we prioritize in terms of our investments on capacity building. So with that, thank you all for joining us, everybody, all our speakers, as well as the other participants. We look forward to spending some time with you here. And I would now like to hand over the floor to Professor Mizan Khan to make his presentation, after which I will invite each of the speakers to give their thoughts and share their thoughts. Mizan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Salim. Distinguished galaxy of panelists, we already have distributed our presentation to you a few days back, so I will not take much time. You are familiar with. You have seen the last slide of our presentation where we have focused on our publications for the last 5 years. Together with Dr. Salim, we have written a book and also quite a number of publications. And the presentation contains today some of the main ideas that we have projected in those publications. So why capacity building is needed for addressing climate change? As the first point that we have mentioned, we have done a review of the NDCs submitted, 169 NDCs, and out of that, 113 NDCs, and from the LDCs, even more than 80% of the NDCs have shown capacity building as a precondition to NDC implementation. So these are, but Bangladesh NDC did not project capacity building as a very important issue. Only for conditional submissions, there was mention of capacity building, institutional capacity building. And so this raises obviously the question of why is so much kind of focus on capacity building? Why is this 50 or 60 years, since 60 years, capacity building is being done by the development partners and also national governments, but what was not right in those initiatives? So we have raised these few questions you saw. What are the capacity building needs, and then what are the matches and mismatches with the previous efforts, and what the NDCs have projected, what kind of needs. And are you familiar that Article 11, kind of first time, an article on capacity building is a potential paradigm shift in the whole business of capacity building if we play the game rightly. Okay, go to next slide. And UNFCCC regime, which includes the convention, the protocol, the Paris Agreement, and all the decisions regarding these, contains these elements. And article, not just Article 11 of the Paris Agreement, but also 12 and 13 are very much part of this whole process of capacity building. Article 12, you know, is a reflection of Convention Article 6, dealing with education, training, and awareness, and Article 13 is about capacity building for transparency. So, reviewing those documents, we have found that these are the basic elements of capacity building: education, training, public awareness, institutional capacity building, research, and technology development. And also we have mentioned here, this comprises both the generic and the specific capacities. Generic capacities means you need general education, general capacities, and the specific capacities refer to the specific skills that are needed for problem solving, for specific problem solving. So go to next slide. Yeah. So what is capacity building and what are its types? Capacity building is a very capacious framework. It is very impervious to any tight definition. You cannot put it in a tight definition, but we have, for our book, we have reviewed about 22 definitions across the world by many different agencies. And then out of that, we have found Undp capacity building definition, which was given about more than 2 decades back, contains some better elements. For example, it refers to capacity building as a process, capacity building at all levels, and also it refers to the long-term sustainability. This is very, very important, which earlier capacity building initiatives were not done. We will refer to. And what types of capacities, for specifically for climate change, we have categorized kind of 3 kinds of capacities. Understanding the problem of climate change in all its dimensions, its impacts on many different sectors of the economy, society, lives, and livelihoods. And then based on this understanding, formulation of the plans and programs at the government level, and also its implementation, because in Bangladesh we know, and you all know, that implementation capacity is the weakest look, kind of. And then based on this, also climate diplomacy is something very active, and Dr. Salim attended all the 25 negotiations so far, climate UNFCCC COPs. I had the privilege of attending almost 20 COPs as a member of the Bangladesh delegation. And diplomacy is, you know, the extension of national interests beyond your border. So once we have the problems, understanding of the problems and the plans and the strategies that we want to negotiate to build a global consensus in the negotiations. So negotiation capacity building is also a very much an important part of the process. Thank you. Go to next slide. And then here in these 2 columns, you see what was done in the past and what the Paris Agreement and the NDCs have reflected. So there is a great mismatch. Earlier capacity building has been done in kind of a very ad hoc manner, led by foreign consultants, project-based, very short-term, and the training programs are very shallow and sporadic, either done by the government agencies or by the NGOs or by the foreign consultants flying in and flying out. And under a 2-3 year project, for example, the project report has been finally submitted, the consultant submitted the report, and as if capacity building was done. But to us, in those publications, we have strongly argued that nothing was done that much, because capacity building requires institution building in the domestic country, endogenous capacity, what we call. But that was not left. So we didn't agree with the first efforts, and we strongly criticized the first efforts that not much was done and something was seriously wrong, and this needs to be changed in the framework under the Paris Agreement. Okay, go to next slide. So the NDCs reflect, for example, these kind of preferences by the developing countries, and specifically we have focused on the LDC. So capacity building for the agriculture sector, energy, water, fisheries, and other sectors. These are the areas, obviously, and for Bangladesh also this applies, where NDCs have articulated, but their articulation was very weak, very general. Their articulation was not aligned to, was not based on learning from past experiences, and it was not aligned to also the financial needs. So it was very vague. So next we have prescribed for the next round of NDCs to be more specific about capacity building needs. Go to next slide, please. So our suggestion was, in those publications, we have a 4-element framework of capacity building, for a new capacity building framework. Under that, we have suggested for establishing a capacity building mechanism under the convention, because many disparate agencies globally, both at the international official level, INGO level, government level, and NGO level, many different organizations, including within the UNFCCC, 12 or 13 agencies deal with capacity building. And there was so much overlapping, so much repetition. That is why we have suggested for establishing a capacity building mechanism within the UNFCCC, which can be done at zero cost, because if we shred off those overlapping elements, then much resources can be mobilized to run this mechanism. And then financing is a big issue, because earlier capacity building initiatives are mostly training and workshop-based training, and short-term, 2 or 3 years, and few workshops are done. But capacity building requires a long-term process. It's a process. So at one shot, you cannot have capacities built. That is why we need longer term financing, at least 7 to 10 years financing. Then you can measure, for example, whether some capacities have been built in some countries or in some systems or not. Then earlier mode of capacity building was focused on foreign consultancy-led. Some bidding was done. Some agency from the donor country used to get that bid, and they used to fly in and organize workshops, inviting government officials, NGO leaders, and civil society representatives, and as if capacity building was done. But that will not do anymore. That cannot have sustained capacity building. So we have suggested for universities to lead the capacity building process, because historically universities are the repositories of knowledge, but for old knowledge and new generation of new knowledge. That is why government certainly will serve as the coordinator, administrative hub coordinator. And under Article 6 of the convention, more than 100 countries have got Article 6 focal point in the parties in the countries. In Bangladesh, we don't have still Article 6 focal point, or so we will argue, will suggest that the government should select a kind of capacity building focal point within the government. And then certainly networks and partnerships are important resources for sustaining capacity building as a process globally and nationally. Thank you. Go to next slide, please, Miti. So these I will not focus on. This is just our framework of capacity building, which encapsulates all the elements that we have discussed. And you can, we have an important element here of MEL, we call monitoring, evaluation, and learning, because capacity building is a process. It's a process of learning by doing. But earlier, no capacity monitoring and evaluation done. If we used to do it, then a new project would have been initiated to measure the capacity. But this measuring and monitoring evaluation should be very much a part of the built-in process of any project. So go to next or last kind of slide. Miti. So as I have already mentioned that NDC reflects high demand, but the details and the specificity of severe needs are lacking in those LDCs with no clear modalities of resources to realize them. So NDCs need to align the transparency of action and support, which was not there in the submitted NDCs, because this transparency of support and action is very important for having effectiveness of the activities that you do. And so this requires further clarity and better scoping and direction in CV through communications. And for the next round of NDCs, we hope to provide, I think UNFCCC Convention Secretariat will lead to develop a guidance on how to articulate capacity building needs in the next round of NDCs. So this is, I think, our last slide. And we have another slide. You have seen the questions already. So we will expect now your reflections. And the last slide, as I have mentioned, shows the publications that we have done for the last few years on this issue. So this is about the sharing of our thoughts today.
Thank you very much, Professor Mizan, for that excellent presentation. Just to summarize, basically what we are putting forward is the notion that we need to invest in long-term capacity building. It's not just a one-off. You cannot do it by having fly-in, fly-out consultants do workshops anymore. Those were useful to start with, but are no longer fit for purpose. We need to be investing in a long-term program, which should include both the government as well as non-governmental actors. Each group of actors needs to be specifically given information that is relevant for them. We distinguish between two kinds of information. Firstly, the beginning is to tell people about the problem. Climate change is a problem. We are all going to face the problem in different places, in different ways. So we need to understand the problem, which we call awareness raising, awareness of the problem. To a large extent, I believe in Bangladesh, we have achieved that. There is a great deal of awareness of climate change as a problem. We now need to move to phase 2, which is what do we do about the problem? And when we start thinking about what to do about the problem, then not everybody has to do the same thing. It depends who we are, where we live, which part of the problem is important for us. If we live in the coastal, low-lying coastal area, then salinity or cyclones. If we live in flood-prone areas, then floods. If we live in drought-prone area, then droughts. If we are within the government in an agriculture ministry, we have one job. If we are in water ministry, we have another job. If we are non-governmental actors in the private sector, we need to know what we can do. Academics like us, we need to know what we can do. So when we move from problem to solutions, the solutions get disaggregated, and it depends on who needs to be doing what and what knowledge they need to do that. And that knowledge then capacitates, and then people have the capabilities to use knowledge and enhance their capacity. And we are estimating that in order for a country like Bangladesh to achieve some level of resilience to the impacts of climate change by capacitating all our citizens, it will take around roughly 10 years. So we are calling this a 10-year journey for us to take together going forward. We are very pleased, as I said, to have a galaxy of very important speakers. So I'm going to now invite our first designated speaker, who represents one of the most important institutions in Bangladesh, the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission prepares our plans for the future. They do the regular 5-year plans. We are just completing our 7th 5-year plan. They are embarking on the 8th 5-year plan. And then after that, the 9th 5-year plan will take us through the next 10 years. And then we also have a perspective plan to 2041, and we have a long-term Delta plan to 2100. So Bangladesh has already invested significant amount of intellectual effort and consultation to develop these long-term plans. I would now be very grateful if Professor Shamsul Alam, who is the Senior Secretary, Ministry of Planning, and also a member of the General Economics Division, who is in charge of all our plans and has been making all of these plans for quite a number of years. Sir, if you would like to share your thoughts on what you think we should be prioritizing going forward to build capacity to tackle climate change. Sir.
Thank you very much. Very enlightening discussions we have at this webinar, no doubt. Dr. Mijan also very succinctly and very pointedly actually talked on the issue. Though apparently seeing the slides, initially I thought it's very complicated things because I was never a science student, so and never very much involved with technicalities of climate change impacts and all this. So his presentation was quite, focused, and I could get him actually what he meant. So I thank Dr. Mijan very much. And I take the cue from Dr. Salimul Haq, who said we have enough awareness already built on climate change impacts, issues, and fallout, all this. So I feel quite, enlightened hearing both of you up until now. So it's really very useful that I participated in this webinar. On the first point, awareness building, it is true that we are quite aware and concerned about what will be happening with the changing climate parameters. Every day we are seeing, not every day now, within months, couple years, we can assess and see what changes have taken place. Temperature has risen already. We understand that much. There is rainfall variability. We understand that much. So there is intrusion of salinity. We understand that much. We see, because of human actions, our groundwater getting down every day. So the issue is quite complex and comprehensive, climate change issue and its impact, no doubt. And practically, we have to give more attention in future. Things will not go as we did in the past because of climate change issue, make many things complex, particularly in terms of planning. Mere simple socioeconomic planning may not result in much benefit nowadays unless we care about climate change impact, if I say in a very in a generalist way, as I understand. But awareness already has built, no doubt about that. Unless there was quite concern about climate change, we could not be able to formulate a 100-year plan focusing climate change issues, handling climate change impacts in our country. So that's the glaring example. As a nation, we are quite concerned and aware about what we are going to face. So very timely manner, we formulated Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. All those who are participating perhaps know it well. So, but the big thing is actually the lacuna is of the whole system. We don't have enough skilled manpower. Skilled manpower in a sense, we don't have enough knowledgeable person handling climate change issues. It is quite comprehensive. It has many facets, many areas. In different areas we face different climatological fallout. In barren area, whatever we find there. In coastal areas, the situation is different, and they face different kind of climate change fallout, say waterlogging, line water intrusion. In other areas, in other hotspots, different kind of climatological impacts we can perceive, we can understand. So it's a really complicated issue. It's simply we have to handle climate change issue with science. That I understand very much, and we all should know that without science and scientific education, without technology and technological innovations, actually it would be very difficult to handle climate change fallout or climate change impacts. That's why the question of capacity building is very much pertinent and relevant. And you have chosen the very pertinent topic today, talking about capacity building on climate change. So certainly capacity building not for only 2 days, 3 days training would do, not 1 week or 3 weeks training would do. So as I said, it's a very complex issue. Just a moment, I stop my phone. So we need to start with introducing as a basic prerequisite, I understand, science education at every level, particularly from the school days and college and universities. We must emphasize science education, number one. Having humanities, all this, that may be, of course, complementary courses are like that. We can't deny that you don't need economics. We can't deny that you don't need sociology. What I mean, at least basic foundation up to intermediate level should have enough foundation on science education. That's needed for handling not only climate change issues that will make us more rational, more facts-based, more materialistic, that will help indirectly social development also, that will help change our attitudes, our perception about society, civilization. So science education is a must. I say in a very comprehensive way. So that is with that, and climate science must be taught in universities in a very systematic way. In all universities, we have now department of environmental issues. We have department in different universities that should be more inclined to handling the climate change fallout or climate change impact issues very much. Not only theoretical knowledge will enough. That's why capacity building is it has more practical connotation rather than only having education or only just general knowledge.
Thank you.
So what I want to say.
Thank you.
I mean, just a moment. So I'm taking much time, maybe. Okay. Just I'll be briefing. I will brief it as early as possible.
Please,
so about capacity building, what I understand, it's not a question of 2 days, 3 days training, but we need continuous talking discussion on climate issues. Particularly, we are shortage of skilled manpower. It is evident by, only we could have only 3 projects or 2 projects supported by climate funds I applied for and already granted. Dr. Salim will know it better. So how come so a big nation having only 2-3 projects? That actually reflect we need to have urgently trained manpower on managing climate change issues, financing climate actions and all this. So certainly, as you said very rightly, it's not a very short-term course we'll do. We need to have a long-term program. As Khan also emphasized, we need to emphasize a long-term program we need to invest for long-term program to handle climate change issues. And the university should come forward with hands-on training, with a problem-solving attitude, which have practical relevance. So certainly, I do agree very much with you. University should play a big role in imparting training on or making skillful men on climate issues.
Thank you.
And focal point for focal point for government should be, as I understand, I mean, it's obvious that Ministry of Environment Climate Change should be the focal point for any capacity building. If government has to be focal point, then Environment Ministry certainly would be the right candidate for that. So I don't elaborate more. I know there are other speakers. So I just felt as a planner what I felt, and I fully appreciate that the coming days will be more with climate issues, talking on climate issues, and we must give due attention on incorporating climate things into our academics, into our researches, into our courses, curricula. So thank you very much.
Thank
you
you,
allowed me to talk to, but as I have no very much technical knowledge.
Thank you, sir.
So you understand.
Thank
very
you,
much.
sir. You are our leading planner. Our planning is in your hands. One of the things, sir, that you might be interested to know, we have in fact already initiated under the Gobeshana Universities Consortium a plan to develop a distance learning module on the Delta plan. And in fact, I think Catherine is on the call here. She might be able later to share a little bit about where we are on that, which we hope we can give to all the universities in Bangladesh going forward. Let me now turn to our second designated speaker, who is Ms. Sultana Afroz, who is the CEO of the Public-Private Partnership Office in the Prime Minister's Office, and was previous to this also the National Designated Authority for the Green Climate Fund that Sir just mentioned, the climate finance source of funding, which we hope to be able to tap in future. Sultana, can you unmute your mic and please share your thoughts with us?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So Assalamu alaikum, and also I would like to thank Dr. Salim ul Haq and ICCCAD for inviting me to such a good discussion. It's a very timely and very important topic to combat climate change. But today, I'm sure that even Dr. Shamsu Alam sir and others will talk about, already here talked about capacity building, and others learned speakers will also mention important issues on capacity building. But I would really like to highlight on capacity building in the area of partnership. Bangladesh is the global poster child of adaptation, and our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is a global leader on climate change, especially on adaptation actions. As a nation, we are highly respected, while climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction issues are discussed at global level. Climate change is a political and economic priority in the government of Bangladesh, which clearly reflects what our Shamsu Alam sir just mentioned, that it is reflected in our 7-5-year plan, and of course it will be in the 8-5-year plan, Delta plan, and election manifesto of the present government. In 2020, we also suffered with Amphan and floods along with global COVID-19 pandemic. The triple burden on the society, economy, and people by the COVID-19 cyclone Amphan and flood 2020 cannot be easily understood by many countries in the world. A cyclone and floods are more frequent in Bangladesh, though our mortality to these disasters are insignificant, but economic loss and impact on poverty graduation is huge. This needs to be accounted as a priority while we discuss about capacity building and partnership in climate actions. Our current effort on adaptation in Bangladesh is predominantly public sector oriented, which is good start, but not enough if we consider the economy of Bangladesh, where 82% of the GDP is contributed by the private sector. And climate change has both public and private dimension. It is an impact of global bad emissions, which is not caused by the citizens of Bangladesh, but its impact the individual farms, production, and well-being. The public expenditures are huge, around $3 billion per year to compensate those losses, and it has fiscal burden on public sector. If we look at the private sector engagement in climate action, that is not only nominal, but also extremely insignificant in terms of the needs and scope. Of course, private sector and other NGOs are working on climate change issues, and they have been doing very well. And, you know, it has an impact for the society. But the, the only, if we look at the their contribution also as a partner building with private sector, we have a question. And whether are we doing enough in attracting the private sector in Bangladesh, in adaptation investment in Bangladesh? Whether enough private sector to private sector partnership or public-private partnership is evident in adaptation actions in Bangladesh. If not, why? Did we invest enough time and resources to understand such lower level cooperation? I will request you to invest your capacity building focus on such private and public-private partnership in climate adaptation actions in Bangladesh. Second question I want to raise today, whether climate change adaptation or mitigation investment is discussed and taught in investment finance course. If not, then we are doing enough in human resource capacity building for fostering a market-led approach in adaptation. I know, Dr. Salimul Haq, you have your different, courses on climate, and bringing students from LDCs and other countries and doing a great course. But we would like to give emphasis on the, investment or the private sector's cooperation in this area. And third question, whether our institutions, including public and private sector institutions, are ready to support private and public-private partnership in climate adaptation investment. If we want to change Bangladesh's narrative as a vulnerable country to most resilient countries, the capacity building for private and public-private partnership should be a top priority of the country. I think government of Bangladesh, private sector, apex body, development partners, UNFCCC, United Nations, and other stakeholders should think seriously in, to support in this partnership. And here today, I really wanted to raise this public-private partnership because you know that I have been posted as a CEO and a secretary in the Prime Minister's office, the Public-Private Partnership Authority in the Prime Minister's office. And I really welcome, and my office is really ready to support you in promoting such partnership. And of course, capacity building in Bangladesh. I want to really mention here that I had a meeting with Dr. Salimul Haq. Since I was also involved while I was working in ERD with Green Climate Fund and other stakeholders. And of course, I met Farah in different meetings. And we had really planned how can this public-private partnership can be, put in place into the higher policy makers. So I had a meeting with Dr. Salimul Haq, and we really want to work on loss and damage areas. So this is the way we can have the public-private, partnership, and we can really go with the capacity building. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sultana. We will definitely be following up with you and take up your suggestion to involve private sector as well in the public-private partnerships, capacity building going forward. It's now my pleasure to invite Rear Admiral Qazi Sarwar Hussain, who is now an advisor for the BIMRAD, representing not just the Navy, but an enormous resource of Bangladesh, which is our marine resources, as well as our land resources. And they are doing some excellent work in this area. So I'd now invite Rear Admiral Qazi Sarwar Hussain to share his thoughts. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Salimul. First of all, a big thank you to ICCCAD for giving me this opportunity to share this platform with so many talented panelists. The organization that I represent, please allow me a minute to introduce my organization. That is the Bangladesh Institute of Maritime Research and Development, in short, BIMRAD. BIMRAD is a premier maritime think tank group, which has been established very recently, only in 2018, with an aim to conduct research and policy advocacy on the use of the marine resources, that is the sea resources that Bangladesh has, and also how to ensure the optimum utilization of these precious resources that we have in the Bay of Bengal. Now, we also conduct research on climate change, and it is our pride and privilege to be associated with ICCCAD and also IUB to be able to deal with such a complex and such an overriding issue of climate change. Now, having said that, let me focus to the topic of today's discussion about the capacity building of on climate change. Now, we have heard some wonderful discussion on climate change. I have very little to add, except that I want to offer a very practical perspective on the effect of climate change at sea. Having served at sea for almost 4 decades, I have had experienced the effect of climate change on first-hand basis, and it's a real life experience of seeing how sea behaves, how sea react with this adversity of climate change. Now, most of the speakers that I heard, when they talk about the effect of climate change on sea, their focus is limited up to the coastline. I mean, they talk about sea level rise, they talk about salinity intrusion, they talk about the cyclones and storm surges, etc., etc. But how far inward into the sea can we assess and can we study the effect of climate change? I will make an attempt to take you into the sea, and understand how sea behaves with these adverse impact of the climate change. Now, before I do that, let me also tell you that professionally, I was a deep sea diver. I have had experience of diving in almost all the oceans of the world and in our own Bay of Bengal. So I have seen how sea react, how sea changes, how the chemistry of the ocean, how the ocean biology, how the ocean biodiversity react to these changes, the climatic changes, how the sea become more warmer, when sea become more acidic, what happens to its biodiversity. For example, when the sea is warmer, what would happen to its chemistry, its biology? Let me make an attempt to discuss some issues of biodiversity, especially the changes in the sea itself. We all know that the sea absorbs 90% of the heat that we generate through industrialization and burning of the fossil fuel. Now imagine if this 90% heat would have to be absorbed by the atmosphere, our world Earth would have been warmer by 56 degrees Celsius, and that is equivalent to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, could we have sustained? How does ocean sustain that amount of heat that it absorbs? But then ocean has a limit also. It is probably coming to a saturation point. We are seeing the telltale sign of ocean warming. Ocean warming is driving the biodiversity in a different direction. For example, the fish species are traveling towards the colder region towards pole, and there is going to be imbalance between the warm water fish and then the cold water fish. Look at the Bay of Bengal. As of late, recently, our fishermen, there is a scarcity of species diversity in Bay of Bengal itself. We have less number of types of fish now that we get. The additional fisherman has to travel 15 to 20 nautical mile now to catch fishes, which they used to earlier, was able to catch within the coast itself. So the warmer ocean is also resulting into ocean acidification, is the second point that I want to discuss. Very briefly, I will go over this, then I will try to go to the capacity building measures, which is more important for our discussion today. So the ocean acidification is a chemical process. The ocean is absorbing 33% of the carbon dioxide that is being produced on land, produced by us, by burning fossil fuel, by burning industries. So when the ocean, this is in tunes of 22 million tons of carbon dioxide is being absorbed every year in the ocean. And that is equivalent to 500 billion tons of carbon dioxide in the ocean. Now, when these amount of carbon dioxide dissolve into the ocean becomes acidic. The pH level of the ocean goes down. When the pH level goes down, it also affects the maritime biodiversity. The coral get bleached, and there are coral depletion also. The coral species, the shellfishes which has calcium carbonate shell, their carbonate shells are badly affected, and so does the coral also. So the coral became bleached, and coral is a very important ecosystem in our ocean. For example, coral occupies only 1% of the ocean, but it provides habitat to 25% of the marine species in the ocean that we have. So we need to really protect the corals. What is happening is the warmer ocean and also the ocean acidification is causing bleaching of coral. You can remember in 1998 we had this El Nino effect when the Great Barrier Reef was devastated, and the Great Barrier Reef lost almost 2/3 of its coral population. Then in 2002 and 2016, there was further escalation of this bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef itself, in other parts of the world as well. Let's talk, for example, there were coral bleaching in Maldives. When I was in Maldives, I was invited by the Maldives Tourism Board to assist them in restoration of some of their coral reef system. I worked with a group of local divers from Maldives to restore some of their the coral reef system. Back in Bangladesh, in Bay of Bengal, we are also experiencing the coral bleaching. Saint Martin Islands is the only coral island that we have. The Saint Martin's Island is also experiencing severe coral bleaching. When we were young divers in around 80s, there were 141 species of coral available in the Saint Martin Island. But the latest scientific studies suggest there are only 41 species left in this island. So these kind of coral bleaching is affecting the biodiversity as a whole. Now, in this issue of coral biodiversity, I draw attention of Dr. Sanaul Haq. He just said that there are very less number of projects for preserving the biodiversity. May I submit to you that BIMRAT has already submitted a project for restoration of coral population of the Saint Martin Island in collaboration with Shere-Bangla Agriculture University. Sir, I would draw your kind attention and indulgence so that this project is passed and we can take up this noble task of restoring the coral population of the Saint Martin's Island. As far as the capacity building is concerned, I would urge upon one thing, that the activities at sea, especially the climate change effect at sea, remain out of sight and out of mind. We should have a sound strategy and a policy formulation with a definitive guideline and with a definitive timeline attached to this strategy. And then there is one point about the inter-ministerial coordination. I have a suggestion with this, especially as far as the sea restoration of the climate effect is concerned. I can say that we have a blue economy cell, which has been formed to supervise the blue economy activities of the government of Bangladesh. So if this blue economy cell can be upgraded to a division and placed under the authority of the Honorable Prime Minister as a division and named as a maritime division, this division could look after the entire gamut of maritime domain of Bangladesh, including the maritime climate, including the effect of climate at sea, including the marine ecology, including the safety at sea, including search and rescue, and including maritime pollution. So I strongly suggest the maritime division can be formed under the Honorable Prime Minister to look after the entire maritime domain of Bangladesh. And with this, I will end, and I would look forward to have thought-provoking questions from the audience. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rear Admiral. And in fact, the reason we invited you is to make sure that the maritime sector does not stay out of sight and out of mind. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And in fact, one of the points that you raised about the increased sea surface temperature was in fact what we saw when Hurricane Cyclone Amphan was sitting in the Bay of Bengal. It became a super cyclone because of the elevated sea surface temperature, which is now attributable to human-induced climate change. So, you know, climate change is no longer something that's going to happen in the future, something that's already happening, and we are facing the consequences of that as we speak right now. So it's much more urgent than it used to be. Now let me move to our next speaker, Farah Kabir, who is the head of ActionAid Bangladesh, and who's been working on this issue for many, many years. And in particular, she and her colleagues in ActionAid have been focusing on the most vulnerable communities in Bangladesh, and also ActionAid internationally and other developing countries as well. And it's something that we have collaborated on for many years. And I will invite Farah to share some thoughts on where do you think we need to be heading next in building our capacity to deal with climate change going forward. Farah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Salim Bhai, and thank you to ICCCAD for inviting me. Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so we have had some excellent presentations, and we have heard from both the government and scientific experienced people, and Dr. Mizan's presentation. I think there is no doubt about the need to have capacity building, but what, where and how, because there's no one size fit all. If you take the example of organizations such as ours, we had to work on two different levels. One was the community that we were, the constituency we work with, and working with them to see what is the impact and how we inform them. The awareness part that you're talking about came from engaging with them and living and going through that experience. Another level, it had to be at the negotiation level, be part of the negotiation, make the asks and demands and understand. So most of us have done this through learning by doing and reading and learning from the academics. And we have even pushed for getting the scientists out of the Eiffel Tower on the ground. And, you know, the Gono Gobeshona part of it was to hear what the people know, because there was an assumption that only the scientists, the Brahmins know, and then the communities doesn't know. But bringing those two together, our realization today is it has to be a life cycle, a comprehensive capacity building. The reason I say this is while we totally endorse academic education, curriculum at the universities, I think it's important also to have curriculums at the school level. It is about having curriculums for the farmers. It is about having courses for the women and the community that are looking after water points, water sources, or it's your agriculture production. It's so important, the capacity building, that when I think of the last 10 years journey, had we been more strong on the sustainable consumption and production, had we done more on plastic waste, then we would have been able to bring some changes and we would not have impacted on the environment as individuals, as communities, as families, as we have done. So the capacity building should be for different targeted groups, and the content has to be customized. But overall, there has to be a capacity building for awareness across board, across the country, and across parliamentarians, policymakers, individuals, academics. So I don't think when you go and talk to an economist, it is necessarily, or we can assume that they make the link with climate change. Or when I talk to a private sector leader, they're not always making the impact that sustainable business and responsible business, which is part of the climate understanding, climate proofing, would go a long way. So when Afroz was talking about the partnership in the private sector, it has taken us almost 10 years to get there. And it's also because we did not know. So while acknowledging that, I think the capacity building ask from all of us should be, there needs to be not a institution, but multiple institutions working at multiple levels to provide both the information, the knowledge, and also experience and learning sharing. Because I don't think any one of us have the entire gamut and understanding at hand. It's still a learning process. So how do we do that? I think if like for the SDG, the government has set up a special unit and it's given such high priority. If we could do the same thing for climate change and learning and action, because it impacts on what the 5-year plan will be. We did advocacy and we see some of it reflected there. It's reflected in the social protection scheme. It's reflected on some of the other development adaptation projects, or even government's funding, the trust fund, the strategy, and so on. Is it enough? It is not enough. And why is it not enough? Because we don't see policy coherence. So I think on another level, we need a lot of capacity building for policy coherence. We need to, today when we are talking about understanding climate change and seeing all the problems, one of the solutions has to be the next energy strategy, which needs to be a combination of green energy, a transition from the fossil fuel energy. But when we talk about fossil fuel and or the coal, dirty coal as a source of energy, the policymakers will come back and tell you that we in Bangladesh have a poverty of energy poverty. We deserve to develop, we deserve to have schools and hospitals and so on, so we need to provide that. We can't live in conditions that was 50 years ago. If that's the case, then you can't be also chairing the LDC group or being the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum and having a coal and the traditional energy. But we fully understand the pressure on the legislators, on the policymakers, because it can't stop and start again. So it has to be in a continuous process. That means we need to have education, policy briefs for coherence of policies. And that's another area which will come from research. So basically my suggestion is that it's a life cycle and it cannot be left at any one point. So for example, ActionAid went into communities, then it's worked with young people. It is working still with young people, it's working at school levels to raise awareness. It's talking about, on one level, about plastic waste. On another level, it's talking about climate financing. And then it's talking about loss and damage. Look at the loss and damage that has happened because of, say, Amphan. Who's responsible for this? How? The government will have to put in recovery package. The government has to deal with the agriculture loss. It has to deal with the cattle and dairy, the health issues, the livelihood issues. And we are doing it, and our governments are trying to do it. But we are not even responsible for the level of emission. So then there has to be a capacity building on holding global leaders accountable, holding policymakers accountable, holding multinationals accountable. That's another kind of education, capacity building. So this is where I think it's very important to have the whole gamut of capacity building. And if there was a unit in the government which could capture all this, that this is what is going on, instead of it being at different places. Now we know climate budget, we're doing an analysis and we find that 22 of the ministries have some form or shape of climate, in references, or the youth ministry has references, but does it also link with the climate justice or the climate change impact? No. So I would leave with the emphasis that we need to do awareness at all levels. We need to do technical learning, and science is important, but also indigenous knowledge is important. So we need to capture that. We also have to remember that climate change does not impact everyone equally. The inequalities are very sharp, and it has impacted women and girls people with disability, Adivashis in a very different way than it impacts you and me. And we have solutions or we have alternatives which the community may not have. So we also need to emphasize on research and innovation. That there's capacity building there as well, that you push the boundaries and you invest in learning and bringing out new innovations, new alternatives and solutions. We are stuck with a solar panel. We're talking about air. Is there something more? I don't know,
Right.
but we need to know.
Exactly.
So I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you very much, Farah, for that inspiring speech. And you very rightly point out that this is it's why I'm calling it a 10-year journey together. And it's a whole of society approach to making us more resilient, including everybody. You want to come in? Yes, sure. Go ahead.
One more point.
Go ahead.
Since you're making it a 10-year strategy, can you also capture the 10 years past? Because that's a building
Absolutely.
block. That's a
Absolutely.
building block. Because
Correct.
otherwise, our new generation will think nothing happened before those 10 years.
Sure. Absolutely.
But it's a building block. And
Absolutely.
that this is how we grew and learned.
Absolutely. And I agree with you entirely. And I mentioned at the beginning that in my view, we have achieved the first foundation, which is a very high level of awareness of the problem. We now are moving into solutions to the problem, which, as you have rightly pointed out, is not one size fit all solution, but multiple solutions for different stakeholder groups. And we have to target them and work with them to enhance their capacity over time. And it's a long-term effort, not a short-term effort. But one of the things you did also mention, which is a very good segue, is the energy sector. And that lets me now introduce our final speaker, who is from ICCCAD, which is the primary institution supporting solar energy, in particular in Bangladesh. So let me invite Inamul Karim Pavel to take the floor. And for all our participants, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box. I can see some of you have already started. After the next speaker, then we'll open it up for comments, questions, and hopefully some interaction with our speakers. Pavel, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for inviting me in this excellent webinar. Respected moderator and distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a very good day to all of you. It's a great honor for me to be a part of today's webinar. And thanks, ICCCAD, for giving me this opportunity once again. So far we have heard excellent presentation from Dr. Mizan and also discussions from my previous panelists. So I'm particularly focusing on the necessity for capacity building in climate change mitigation measures in Bangladesh. So basically we know that we have a two-fold strategy against climate change impacts. Our primary focus is on increasing resilience to the impacts of climate change. At the same time, we have set a target to reduce GHG emission in Bangladesh in our different policy documents. My organization, ICCCAD, as Dr. Salim mentioned, has been implementing various initiatives on climate change mitigation for last 18 years actually. So we implement these projects and programs through capacity building at different levels. We arrange necessary funding and also finance those in a sustainable manner. So as a government-owned institution, ICCCAD's activities in climate change is fully aligned with government's vision, strategy, and targets. So our NDC, nationally determined contributions, has been prepared to manage our growing emissions without compromising our growth, our development. So NDC has identified 3 key emission areas. Amongst these, power sector alone accounts for 30% of total emission, industrial sector 41%, and transportation 26%. So improving industrial energy efficiency, expanding renewable energy, and modernizing transport infrastructure has been identified as 3 key mitigation areas of intervention in our NDC. And we have through NDC, we have set target to reduce 15% GHG emission below business as usual level by 2030. So government has also adopted, Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority has developed Energy Efficiency and Conservation Master Plan, we know, in 2016, which is also has a target to reduce 20% reduction in energy consumption by from 2013 level. Also, Power Sector Master Plan is there, which has been prepared, updated in 2016. Which also has a target of supplying 4,000 megawatt of electricity from renewable energy sources. So achieving, NDC targets, then energy efficiency master plan, then our power sector master plan, all targets. So achieving all these targets require sustainable, substantial amount of investment. So as NDC mentioned that to achieve the mitigation targets, we require about $27 billion of financing. But what is more important to me is that, we need financing, but at the same time, we have to develop our capacity at national level, institutional level, and local level to make this investment sustainable, which is very important to me. So just Dr. Mizan has rightly mentioned that, it's a capacity building is not a short-term approach. Actually, it's a long-term approach. It's a continuous process. So we have to develop the capacity, increase the capacity to achieve our targets. I can cite some examples from our projects and programs implemented in Bangladesh, where capacity building plays a very important part. Our home system program, for example, is the largest off-grid renewable energy program in the world, our solar home system program. So we have electrified more than 1.8 crore people in the off-grid areas through solar energy. And total investment was more than $1 billion. World Bank and most other development partners who are working in Bangladesh, they have supported the program. But initially, when we started the program, it was a very small one actually. At the beginning, we focused on local capacity building of all the stakeholders who were engaged in the program. We first educated ourselves, our people, then we extended training and capacity building support to the partner organizations who will be implementing the program at the field. We also developed a national awareness campaign. We implemented that to educate our target customers, who are the people who are living in the off-grid areas that did not have much knowledge about solar energy back in 2002. So we had to educate them. We had to educate ourselves. We had to educate the stakeholders, and also we have to approach government to get policy level support so that this program can act in a sustainable manner. So capacity building is really important to actually make a program sustainable, to scale up the program. So
thank you.
When we have developed those capacity, then we have seen exponential growth in our implementation. So this is a small example. Now we are focusing on other renewable energy areas. Like the government has set target for setting up large solar energy projects in Bangladesh, in large industrial rooftop solar projects. NDC has target for solar irrigation. So all this require, good amount of capacity building. We need to actually educate the people, educate the beneficiaries, also educate we should have a good number of people here who will actually implement the program. So these are very important aspects we need to consider before starting the program. And Renewable Energy Development Authority, they're doing a very good job in developing local capacity. They are promoting different types of energy efficiency and renewable energy interventions in Bangladesh. They're training, providing training at government level, also at the private sector. So those are important. And
thank you.
yeah. So we have to actually make sustainable, substantial amount of investment in different areas of renewable energy and energy efficiency interventions. All this require actually significant capacity building to achieve our targets. We have by now we have implemented roughly 600 megawatt of electricity, capacity from renewable energy sources, but our target is 4,000. So to go to that level, actually, we have to have capacity building in all types of interventions, which is very important actually to achieve that emission target
Thank you.
in Bangladesh. So that's all from me now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pavel, for that excellent presentation and sharing. And I think you make a very good case to pick up on Farah's point that we need to build on our earlier foundation. And ITCOL is a very good foundation of both public-private partnership as well as capacity building on renewable energy, which was a completely new subject for Bangladesh just a decade or so ago. But within a decade, we have gone up a learning curve very, very fast. And as you say, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, solar home system program in the world. But now the next decade, we have to go even more. We have to multiply by 10, not just go up incrementally. And that really is the challenge now for us. How do we scale up by multiplying 10 times, not just going up 10% at a time? So we are going to have that challenge going forward that we all need to do. I will now open the floor to anybody who wishes to make a point. I've already seen a number of questions and comments in the chat box, which I will give to the speakers. But before I do that, let me invite Catherine Terwishap from Wageningen University, who I see is on the call and who is developing this online course on the Delta Plan that I mentioned earlier. Catherine, would you like to share some thoughts on both the course and also your own thoughts on capacity building now that since you've been working on this for a very long time and have been coordinating collaboration between Netherlands universities and Bangladeshi universities in the field of environment and climate change for a long time now. Catherine, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Salim. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm very grateful to be with you because at the moment we cannot see each other regularly, but from my attic room in my house, I feel very close to you when hearing all these important people saying these things about capacity development, because really this is a very important thing to work on in Bangladesh. And from my side, I'm trying my bit, and I'm always very happy to find so many people to work with. It's not easy, and if it was easy, it would have been solved already. But Bangladesh can do so many amazing things, and we have seen it over time. That it was once called a basket case, nobody would now call it anymore like that. So if you are saying that we need to multiply 10 times or maybe even 100 times, that sounds very difficult, and it is very difficult, but I think Bangladesh can do that. And yes, you should not rely on consultants. I'm also part of the people flying in, flying out. But the longer term commitment, that is what really counts. And in this regard, I'll come to the academic course that we have prepared on adaptive delta management in a second. But I want to mention about the longer term commitment. Like for instance, 10 years ago, Salim, we were working together with the colleagues of Do It, and they prepared a new master's course on climate change related to water and environment. So it does need time. Yes, I fully agree that it's a 10-year journey. I hope to be with you all along. The second point I wanted to mention is that we need to combine, because we need to multiply, but we need to combine implementation also with learning activities, so that if there are new adaptation measures being implemented, don't wait for students to get the cases when they are already fully developed. While we are developing them, get them on board, because we can learn so much and we have to speed up. And the third thing I want to mention is that was also mentioned in the chat about open sharing of data and knowledge. This is indeed very important. Yes, we need to do that. And I think that within the Delta Plan, Professor Shamsul Alam already is working on the example, because there is a knowledge portal created for sharing, for instance, maps on different aspects related to the Delta Plan. So yes, Bangladesh can do it. The part what we are doing on the academic curriculum is that in the Delta Cap project, we have developed an academic curriculum on Delta management and also giving more information about the Delta Plan. We like to spread it to as many people as possible. So it is already, some small part is online. If you check the Delta Cap website, you can register for an online small course, getting the basics about the Delta Plan and this knowledge portal. But what we are currently working on is the multiplier. We would like to reach university teachers with this curriculum. It's an academic curriculum and we'll share about it. I have shared the flyer in the chat. People can register, sending me an email or reaching me through you, Salim Al-Haq, and then we will share the material, but we need a kind of hands-on approach of people, because you cannot just show somebody slides and then they know it. You have to do it, you have to experience it. But if we can try, my dream would be that all the students in Bangladesh know about the Delta Plan and what is the target for the country. And it doesn't mean that we have to know exactly what will happen in 100 years' time, but that we are on a road together and we want to reach somewhere together where nobody is left behind. So if we can reach to the teachers, then they can incorporate in their curricula, and then we can kind of work on this multiplier effect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Catherine. I will invite Professor Shamsul Alam to share some thoughts in a minute, but let me just tell you, sir, that you may recall some time ago, you and I were in a meeting at the BIS, the Bangladesh Institute for Strategic Studies, on the Delta Plan. And I mentioned to you this idea that we would like to develop an online course for universities in Bangladesh, which Catherine and I are now developing. We want to test run it with some faculty in some universities to start with, but over time, what we hope to do is to be able to capacitate at least 2 faculty members in every single university in Bangladesh, and we have more than 100 universities in the country, to be able to provide this course to their master's students, so that every master's student, no matter what subject they're studying, it can be Bangla, it could be English, it could be any subject, they should at least do this online course on the Delta Plan so that they are aware of the national plan for the next 100 years going forward. And this is something that we hope that will be something that will be supported by you and your colleagues working on the Delta Plan, and you will enable us to make this happen. Sir, if you would like to share some comments. You need to unmute your microphone, sir.
Yeah,
yes, go ahead.
Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much. It's very pleasing and heartening to know that you and Catherine actually are developing the courses to be taught on different aspects of Delta Plan. Delta Plan is a comprehensive technical plan, techno-economic plan. We need to have skilled manpower on, on sedimentology, on oceanography, on river morphology, like things. These are all very much related to climate change, of course. So, and we have visualized 100 years to go with, because climate change issue must be seen in a longer perspective. It's not a yearly issue or weekly issue. We must see this. So as why you said for capacity building, you need to have a long-term program. That's very much pertinent. So that's why we have a long-term plan. Many actually wonder why we should have a so long-term plan. Because climate change issue is more pronounced over time. So to handle this, we need to have a plan for longer time period. So it's very much, again, I should say, I'm thankful to you. You already announced before that you will be introducing courses on Delta Plan issue. And it is very much needed. Actually, Delta Plan now guides us to prepare 5-year plan, that I can tell you. Delta Plan actually, we very much guided us in preparing our dream document that we call Second Perspective Plan, Vision 2041. So it's a life and blood plan for this country for in future, because as one of the risk-prone country, or the most risk hazard country in the world, certainly our great way of liberation would be implementation of Delta Plan. So you contributed a lot in terms of ideas, thinking, in visualizing our Delta Plan, in materializing Delta Plan strategies. Catherine contributed a lot, and in terms of implementation now, you are thinking in a very positive way. I am quite thankful to you, and certainly I personally and as official would like to work with you for long. Thank you very much for arranging this very enlightened, informed discussion today. Thank you, Dr. Salimul Haq.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your time. I know we are coming to the end of our time. So let me draw things to a close now by sharing a few thoughts with our participants. And can I invite everybody to turn on your cameras for a moment so we can have a screenshot of everybody in the call. First of all, thank you to all the speakers for excellent presentations and to participants for joining us. We will, from our side, follow up with each of you individually on the points that you made and try and take it forward. This is a start of a conversation, not the end. We are not going to resolve everything here. We are going to continue this conversation. As I said, it's a 10-year journey, which we invite all of you to join us on this journey together, so that we all learn from each other and we all be able to enhance the resilience of this country, everybody in the country going forward. Now, a couple of immediate follow-up activities. I said we'll follow up with each of you individually. We also have a second webinar where we are going to be reaching out to other least developed countries. It's a South-South program of LDC Universities Consortium on Climate Change, with Professor Mizan Khan coordinates out of ICCCAD, my center. And we will be having a meeting with a number of our partners from other least developed countries and initiating a similar discussion in other least developed countries, and to see how we can learn from each other. In fact, one of the things that Pavel did not mention is that ITCOL has also shared its knowledge on renewable energy with many other countries in the developing world, and they see Bangladesh as an example. On adaptation as well, Bangladesh is seen as an example, and we hope moving forward on loss and damage, we can also become an example for sharing our knowledge with other developing countries, particularly other least developed countries. So one of our ambitions is not just only for Bangladesh, but for other South-South learning with other countries as well. And the final upcoming event I want to mention for everybody's information, and we hope that you can then participate and join us for that, will be the next annual Gobeshona conference. For those of you who are not familiar, Gobeshona is a platform of more than 50 universities and research institutes working on climate change in Bangladesh and also internationally, including Wageningen University, where Catherine is. And we meet every year. We do a big conference every year. We have monthly meetings of this, of the research community. The next conference, which is the 7th annual conference, will be from the 21st to the 24th of January next year. And it will be an online conference this time around, rather than an in-person conference as we've done in the past. And we will have a major theme on capacity building over the next 10 years for resilience, for building resilience. And some of the discussion we've had today, we'll write up and that will feed into it. We will approach each of you to see if you would like to participate in that. It'll be over 4 days, so we'll have many different kinds of sessions. We hope that you will be able to join the different sessions that we'll be organizing. And then the day after we finish Gobeshona, which ends on the 24th of January. On the 25th, there is going to be a global adaptation summit, which is part of the Global Commission on Adaptation that was set up about a year and a half or almost 2 years ago under the leadership of Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Bill Gates, and Kristalina Georgieva, who was then at the World Bank, is now at IMF, and Bangladesh Prime Minister was one of the sponsors. And so this Global Adaptation Summit was originally supposed to be in October in the Netherlands, but now because of COVID, it has now been postponed to the 25th of January, and it's going to be a global event. So not just in one place, but globally in different locations across 24 hours, starting in the Pacific and then moving around the globe with the sun. One of those events will be here in Dhaka. It will be hosted by the government, and Prime Minister will probably make a statement, and there'll be other participants taking place in that. And we hope that our outcome from the Goveshona conference the day before will feed into that global summit, where Bangladesh can take forward the ideas of building locally led adaptation towards resilience in particular. This is going to be our theme for that. So I invite all of you to remain on this journey with us going forward in these different milestones that we have. And we will continue to have these conversations bilaterally. Every now and again, we'll invite you back with others as well to see how we are making progress. Because as Mizan mentioned at the very beginning, one of the key elements that we have been missing in the past is measuring progress. We are not being very good at that. We do a lot of things, and Bangladesh is very, very good at doing many things, but we don't necessarily measure, account, evaluate what we do very well. And that's one of the things that we want to enhance our capacity to do that going forward. And we see all of you as fellow partners in this journey going forward. So with that, let me thank you all once again and bid you goodbye. Khuda Hafiz, thank you for joining. অনেকে অবজেকশন দিচ্ছিল যে আমরা বাংলায় করিনি, আমাদের বেশ কয়েকজন অতিথি বিদেশি আছেন বলে আমরা করতে পারিনি, but in future we'll do Bangla versions as well.
Thank you, ধন্যবাদ। আর আমরা কি এটার একটা সামারি ভার্সনটা পাঠিয়ে দিলে ভালো হবে?
হ্যাঁ, আমরা একটা লিখিত ভার্সন করে আমরা এটা পাঠিয়ে দেব।
আর যেহেতু চ্যাটে অনেকগুলো রিসোর্সেস শেয়ার করা হয়েছে, সেই লিংকগুলো দিয়ে দিলে সবার কাজে লাগবে।
কারেক্ট, সবাইকে দেওয়া হবে। থ্যাংক ইউ।
থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ।
খোদা হাফেজ।
সবাই ভালো থাকুন।
ভালো থাকুন আপনি। খোদা হাফেজ।